Bipolar disorder, a lot of people think about it just as experiencing manic or depression. But I think it's really important to remember that no one is ever at 100% emotional intensity all the time. So there's
Mm.
also this baseline. As providers, it's really important to try to find what that baseline looks like. And then once you kind of know what that baseline looks like as a provider, then it's important to implement skills to try to return to that baseline.
Welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. This is a show presented by Heart and Solutions Counseling Agency. We release new episodes every Sunday at 5 p.m. Central and encourage you to batch up that laundry, put away the dishes, plan for the week ahead, or do any other task that might seem daunting while you give our show a listen. You might just be encouraged to call your therapist, connect with this week's guest, or seek out those services you've been considering for a while but haven't made the commitment to yet. If you are in the state of Iowa and are in need of mental or behavioral health counseling, give us a call at 1-800-531-4236. Enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome back to the You Need a Counselor podcast. My name is Dr. Julie Johnson. I'm the president and founder here at Heart and Solutions Mental Health Counseling and Behavioral Health Counseling in Iowa.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt. I am our vice president in charge of the BHIS department, Behavioral Health. And this is our podcast, You Need a Counselor. So we are a podcast designed for people curious about counseling, but have barriers keeping them from experiencing the benefits of counseling. Our mission is to share stories about counseling, good, bad, and indifferent, and spread the message that everyone can benefit from mental health and behavioral health counseling services.
Our guest today is a behavioral health intervention counselor here at Heart and Solutions. We've got Alexis Moore joining us here today. Alexis has her bachelor's in psychology. She's got background work experience working with older folks, working with younger children, working with teenagers, just has the experience of working with people over the lifetime. And now Alexis is a behavioral health intervention counselor working with children ages 4 to age 20. So welcome, Alexis. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks. I'm super excited.
So now tell us, what is BHIS, Behavioral Health Intervention Services?
Yeah, so in BHIS, we do a lot of work with kids to help them with their coping skills, with communication skills, relationship skills, a bunch of stuff like that. And we do fun activities and stuff during sessions to try to work on those things and help the kids out with those skills.
So you've mentioned you worked with all ages, from little kids at daycare to elderly people at a nursing home. Can you kind of talk about what led you to do BHIS and what you like about working with that age group in the middle there?
Yeah. So I worked in many nursing homes for lots of years, and I really loved working with old folks. But I've always loved working with kids as well. And when I was younger, I would like be at a baseball game with my family and go around to all the different families sitting next to us and be like, "Hey, can I like hold your kid, or can I like play with your kid, or do something like that?" So I've always really enjoyed hanging out with kids and doing stuff like that. So I knew that I wanted to work with kids. And then through my own mental health journey, I kind of found my passion for mental health and helping others. So it just kind of fit perfectly to help kiddos with their mental health.
Wow, yeah, I that I can definitely relate with that, with like if there's a party situation, I'm like with the kids or I'm with the cats, right? Or the dogs.
Yes.
So I love that. And so I love that you were able to go, yeah, this is what I'm just naturally interested in, is helping people. And I'm naturally, I gravitate towards children. And there's a sense of just joy and wonderment that children really bring into our lives, and that we can really tap into our own curiosity and enjoyment of things and new perspectives on things when we interact with children. Very cool. So, and now you are looking also to start your master's degree in the future, because your goal is to become a therapist. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. So I want to go back to school here soon. Yeah, life is hard, but um, I am wanting to be a therapist in the future, and I haven't really decided if I want to like specialize in children or older folks, but definitely kind of like end of the spectrum or the other is kind of where I'm leaning. But yeah, I'm super excited, and I know this job as a BHIS provider is giving me great experience and preparing me for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about the difference between BHIS and therapy for somebody listening who's maybe doesn't know what is the difference between the two?
Yeah, so BHIS focuses on behaviors mostly instead of more of the thoughts. And usually in BHIS, we do more like activities and skill learning and things like that. And then in therapy, I'd say it's typically more of a talking process. And of course, you learn skills and stuff in therapy too. But I'd say BHIS is more hands-on for kids. And we do in-home sessions as well instead of meeting at an office.
Yeah, absolutely. Both Chrissa and I did BHIS for a long time, and gosh, it really does prepare you. I don't know, when I first became a therapist, I went, oh my gosh, this is pretty different from BHIS, but man, you learn a lot being in homes and working directly with children because when you're a therapist and you see a child in your office, you're seeing that child completely out of their element. It's like watching a fish out of water. And when you're doing BHIS, you're in the water with that fish and getting to observe how that fish operates in its actual natural environment. So you just gather so much more information. And
Mhm.
I feel like the interventions that we do in BHIS are so specific to the family and so specific to the children because we're also living that family's life. We get used to their culture, their routine within their household.
Mhm.
So,
I think
yeah.
that's another like important aspect of BHIS is that there is a lot of family interaction and kind of working with the whole family to try to help the child's behaviors because we know that it takes a community to change things and make things better. So um, kiddos often can't do that by themselves. So having the parents involved and also teaching the parents the skills that we're teaching the kids has been really important.
Yes. And BHIS is so fun. I used to come home from BHIS sessions and be like, I just got paid for 5 hours to play Mario Kart, or to do Jenga. So it is so fun, and it's so fun for the children as well. What are some of your favorite like fun activities to do in sessions?
So I like having like board games or card games and then making my own rules for them. So I will do like coping skills Uno, or one of my favorite ones is names to apples. So I take the apples to apples game, and then I have the family write down different names, so each of their names and then names of other people they know. And then we use the green cards instead of the red cards. And then they choose, so they draw the person's name, and then they draw the green card to describe that person. And then we talk about like how to appropriately like describe other people. And we also talk about like positive traits, negative traits, and how they can build up those more positive traits once that activity is over. So,
That's so cool. I've never heard of that. Like, that's a really good idea to do with apples to apples. I know you mentioned like a wide variety of skills that people might come to BHIS for. What do you think are like the common reasons or behaviors that people usually come to BHIS services?
I think managing intense emotions is like the number one reason that I've seen. I think it's really, really hard for kids to understand what to do with their emotions when they get really, really heightened. And I think that, in schools and things like that, they're not really teaching many coping skills, relationship skills, communication skills, all that stuff that's really important. So I think those are kind of the main things. And especially like dealing with aggression or anger, I think is the main reason that I've seen, at least for kids to be in BHIS.
Yeah, wonderful. And you also, have experienced counseling services yourself outside of being a counselor. And can you tell us about the experiences that you've had in counseling and how that really impacted your desire to become a counselor?
Yeah. So I have had kind of the wide range of experiences with counseling. I've been in counseling for a while now, and my first therapist, I feel like I knew more about her than she knew about me. And I was 12, so that wasn't great. But I decided to keep trying because I could see how it could benefit me, but that wasn't the right fit. So I made sure to keep trying, and I have had lots of great experiences since then. Um, and I think that that was one reason that I wanted to like get into therapy is because like I wanted to be like not that therapist, not the person that knows less about the client than they know about you. And helping people has always been a passion of mine, so it just kind of correlated there. But one specific example of a therapy that I did that was really, really helpful for me and kind of sparked my interest in working with kids was a DBT group. So DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy. And I was in a group with, I don't know, I think probably about 10 other teens. And we went through lots and lots of skills and worked together, and it was just a really great experience, and that is something that has kind of shaped how I do BHIS. And a lot of the skills that I teach are either from DBT or are things that are correlated to the skills that were taught in that group. So
That's interesting that you like were only 12 too when you first started therapy, but like still felt the need to keep going and like, okay, this isn't right. There should be counseling doesn't feel like this. How do you think you were able to keep trying and finding a new counselor? And then how did you know you found like a good fit for a counselor then after that?
yeah, so I kind of realized that it wasn't working when I was dreading going to every appointment and would get more anxious before the appointment than I was beforehand. So I talked to my mom and told her those feelings, and my mom has always been such a great advocate for me, and she was like, "Okay, yeah, no, this isn't right, so let's keep going." So she also kind of helped me be like, "We need to find something that fits, and this isn't fitting." Um, and then I think just the way that you feel when you're with your therapist is kind of how you know if it's a good fit or not. You know, if it's causing the that heightened anxiety, or if you're dreading it, or if you're feeling stressed while you're there, it's probably not the right fit. But when I did find therapists that were good for me, I felt like I could share anything and like I wasn't oversharing. And I felt like I wasn't being judged and things like that. So those are kind of the things that I looked out for.
Absolutely. That feeling that we get when we're in the session, that is the most important part of the experience because anybody can do skills. Anybody can do intervention. The things that therapists are trained to do and taught to do when it comes to specific intervention, anybody can be taught that. You know, you could teach, oh, Chat GPT already knows how to do those things, right? But it doesn't, but we wouldn't think about maybe going to Chat GPT to get those interventions completed for us because that main piece is the relationship and the trust and the feeling of safety that that provider, either BHIS counselor or therapist, provides to us when we're in the session. And I think sometimes it is easy to rationalize that away, you know, to get into our heads and go, well, they're an expert, right? I might be feeling this, but maybe I'm wrong. I've never done counseling before, right? Maybe this is just how it feels. I feel like that at the doctor all the time, right? So
Right.
when we it's easy to rationalize those things to ourselves and kind of minimize those feelings that we're having. But if we're having those feelings, what a great example that you're setting of no. Voice that to our support people, right? And voice that to the counselor, because even voicing it to the counselor, if that counselor responds in a not so helpful manner, then we know, oh, well, that's great. That's helpful actually, because now I really know that you're not the right fit for me, right? And then trying again. And I think that trying again can feel so daunting for so many people, but it is that skill, right? We build up that tolerance and we build up that ability to respect how we're feeling and respect our own experiences and validate them. So I love that that you're talking about. And so you did the DBT group as a teenager, and what a great, I mean, gosh, DBT groups are so great. Those skills are so amazing. Can you tell us about some of those skills that you learned there and that you utilize now?
Yeah, so kind of like one of the core aspects of DBT is the theory that there's three states of mind. So there's an emotional state, a reasonable state, and then a wise mind, which is the combination of both of them. And I really use that a lot with my clients now to have them identify what kind of things are they thinking, doing, feeling when they are letting their emotions control them, when they're in that emotion mind. And then what kind of things are they doing when they're only thinking about reason and the facts and not really using their emotions. And then what kind of things are they doing when they're in wise mind. And that has really clicked with a lot of my clients. And then I've also had like the parents remind the kids to use Wise Mind or things like that. And kind of that integration with the parents, like we were talking about before, has um, leads to the most amount of help, I think. And then a couple other skills that I use a lot from the DBT is like the ABC please skill, which is accumulating positive emotions or experiences, building mastery, and coping ahead. And then the please stands for oh shoot, I don't remember exactly what the police stands for, but it's pretty much talking about minimizing the things that are making you more vulnerable to having heightened emotions. Um, and then so those skills put together can really help kids to either prepare for stressful situations, and then also minimize their emotional intensity when the situation happens.
Can you talk about the difference of like when you're thinking only with your emotional mind versus rational versus wise, and like why it's important to kind of use a mix of them and use your wise mind as opposed to just thinking emotionally or just thinking rationally?
Yeah, so if you are in emotion mind all of the time, you're probably going to be doing things very impulsively, and you're probably not going to be making great choices all the time. And if you think about a time that your emotions were in control and um, you probably weren't thinking very clearly. But if you also think about a time that you're just in reason mind and not using your emotions, maybe you were like really, really focused on work and then you were just like doing work for hours and hours and forgot to eat and forgot to take a breath, things like that. So it's really important to try to put those two things together and kind of use the best of both of them. To be in wise mind and to um, think about your emotions and what you're feeling and stay mindful and things like that, while also thinking about the reason and the facts and not letting assumptions come in and things like that.
Yeah, what I love about the wise mind paradigm is that it allows space for emotions in reasonable thinking. And sometimes there is such a dichotomy especially when we talk to children as teachers or as parents or as aunts and uncles or caregivers. We There tends to be this kind of dichotomy, right? It's either you're acting rationally, you're acting like a grown up, basically, right? We expect children to act like a little grown up and act rationally all the time, right? Or there's an outburst of emotions that is problematic to the grown up, the teacher, the caregiver, right? And so there kind of tends to be this dichotomy, and the more that we separate those two and say you're either one or the other, you've got to do one or the other. And we tend to try to push children towards the rational side because that's what's most convenient for the adults in that situation. Because adults are trained, we're so trained and so narrow focused on, okay, it's 12:05 right now. We've got to do this. Okay, I've got to put gas in my car. All of these things that we're so trained to do and complete. Um, and so then there's such a buildup that happens of emotion when there is no outlet for that. And so and especially when as a child we're taught to only listen to the external rules around us, the external boundaries around us, the external expectations around us, and to act rationally and reasonably like a young adult or like a small adult, we don't end up being able to have that outlet for those emotions to tell us the things that the emotions need to tell us, and that we really need to be able to listen to. So that wise mind approach really does allow an outlet for that, and to say like, yeah, I don't have to suppress all my emotions until I have a giant outburst of these emotions that stops myself from being able to function in my world, right? I can utilize that emotion with the rational side of things and still benefit from what my emotions are telling me, right? It's communication with ourselves.
Yeah, I think that another thing that I really like about Wise Mind and this kind of theory is that it doesn't place an emphasis on good or bad emotions. And I think a lot of kids have a perception that happy is a good emotion and sad is a bad emotion, and all of the things like that, when in reality, emotions aren't good or bad, they just are. And I think a lot of kids kind of don't feel like they have permission to experience their anger, sadness, or emotions that they think are bad. So I think this wise mind theory kind of gives them permission to feel those feelings while still using their rational mind to make good decisions.
Yeah, I love that. Can you kind of go over like the difference between, so you did both individual and group therapy then, like what is the difference between the two and what did you like versus didn't like with the two of them?
Yeah. I think there's definitely pros and cons to both. I think in individual therapy, when you do have a provider that you feel safe with, it's a lot easier to completely open up and share all the nitty-gritty details that you probably don't want other people to know about, or just that you feel uncomfortable sharing. Um, and then in group therapy, I really liked the like camaraderie and kind of the like, oh, wait, every single person here is feeling this or is experiencing these thoughts. Like, oh, so I'm not alone. This isn't just me. And kind of like group therapy kind of normalized having mental health um, illnesses as a teenager, and it normalized talking about those things and building skills without having the negative stigma that it sometimes has.
Absolutely. I think especially for children and young adults, there aren't as many discussions happening with our adolescents, right? So there are a lot of discussions happening about adolescents, but there aren't a lot of discussions happening with adolescents. And so those groups and being able to normalize, like, no, I'm not the only person that's going through this, right? I'm not the only, and I'm so much not the only person that's going through this that there are interventions specifically to help me with the things that I'm coping with. I think is just such a hopeful place to be. And there's so much stigma around diagnosis in general, mental health diagnoses. And so when we can come into a place where we go, oh, but if I met this group member on the street, right? Would I know that they were struggling with these things, right? I probably wouldn't. And so it can help us also to take a step back and to not see ourselves as stigmatized as we might think that we are when we have certain diagnoses. So just a wonderful, wonderful thing. And what are some challenges that teenagers might be facing or going through, or what are some diagnoses that they might be given that would kind of indicate, yeah, a DBT group might be really helpful for this individual?
So I think there's lots of diagnoses that would be um, helpful, or the group would be helpful for. I think depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder, um, BPD, those are some of the main diagnoses that DBT groups work really well on. And I think that some of the challenges that teens are facing is kind of that perceived stigma, whether it's there or not. I think um, a lot of younger kids feel like that stigma is really bad, I guess, whether it is or not, you know. And I think that it's kind of that like internalized judgment. That can deter teens from wanting to do a group or things like that. And I think that just kind of the culture that society has set up that, beauty standards aren't attainable. And if you do this, you're weird. If you do this, you're stupid, things like that. There's all these different, just crazy rules that society has set up that I think makes it really hard for teens to want to seek help in the first place or even acknowledge that there's something going not great or wrong.
How did you start therapy and get into the DBT group? Because I know, like you said, and I agree, I think it is hard for teens to even admit they have a problem or need counseling or want to try something like the DBT group. How did you, I know you said your mom's always been like a big advocate for you. So was it your mom who suggested it, or how did that kind of start?
No, I had a family member pass away that I was really close to around that age. And I was very, very sad for a long time about it. And things just kind of got a little bit worse, and I was isolating myself and not enjoying the things that I was previously enjoying. Dance was always a really big part of my life growing up, and I just had no interest in going to dance, was dreading it, things like that. And I was like, okay, this doesn't feel good. I want to be with other people, but I don't at the same time. And like I want to do these fun things, but I also don't. And I just knew that I needed something to change. So I talked to my mom about how I was feeling, and then she helped with the process of getting things started. So I
Wow.
guess one piece of advice that I have for others is to advocate for yourself, even if it's really hard. Advocate to someone that you trust, someone that is a good support for you. If it's your mom, if it's a teacher, if it's, whoever it might be, like advocate for yourself and continue to advocate for yourself because that's a really big skill that you will need throughout your whole life.
Absolutely. And especially in a situation where there's a major loss, and there's grief that happens, and there's symptoms that come along with that grief, and then it can feel so easy for guardians or teachers to kind of reason away those uncomfortable experiences and symptoms that a child or an adolescent is having. And so good for your mom for not saying, oh, well, of course she's feeling this way, right? She's had a major loss. This will pass. This is a phase. This just takes time. Good for your mom for saying, no, this, there isn't a need for you to have these symptoms that don't feel good to you, right? There is a need to process that grief. There is a need to feel those feelings of loss that you're having, but there is not a need to do that alone. And there is not a need to do that without assistance and without and exacerbating some of the uncomfortable symptomology that we're having. And when we let those things just kind of try to pass with time, a lot of times those symptoms kind of snowball on themselves. So you talked about the isolation that can come with grief, and that feeling of, well, I don't want to connect, right? There's an attachment wound a lot of times when it comes to losing somebody so close to us. And so that can make it so difficult to attach with new people. And that's a cycle that will just continue and will continue to snowball, right? Because the more that I don't want to attach with other people, the more that I feel isolated and that I can't attach with other people. And so when we go through that alone without support and just hope that time will take it away, it really just kind of snowballs forward. So good for you for advocating for yourself, for accepting that support and seeking out that support. And good on your mom for believing you and validating that no, what you're experiencing is not comfortable, and you don't need to go through that alone. Yeah,
Mhm.
wonderful example. And I love also that you shared that, if it's not your mom, right? So what a gift it is to have a mom who says, yeah, we're gonna help you, right? Let's do something to get you some help or some support. But not everybody has that support in their life, but most people have somebody, right? Most people can seek somebody. And that can be so challenging when we are in a isolating situation where it feels like, oh, I've got to isolate to protect myself. And your message comes across loud and clear of reach out. It's a hard thing to do, but it's a hard thing to stop a snowball from rolling down a hill, right?
Right.
So we've got to reach out. We got to put a leg out and stop that snowball from going forward, even though it's scary to stick your leg out when you're rolling down a hill.
Yeah.
So I love the example that you're providing. And you talked about one of the diagnoses that DBT groups can be so helpful for, which is bipolar disorder. And I'd love to hear you talk a little bit more about this diagnosis.
Yeah, so bipolar disorder, I think a lot of people think about it just as experiencing manic or depression, but I think it's really important to remember that no one is ever at 100% emotional intensity all the time. So there's
Mm,
also this baseline. So there's, manic symptoms, depressive symptoms, and then also a baseline. So as providers, it's really important to try to find what that baseline looks like. So,
mm,
like, what kind of things are they doing when they're just feeling calm or when they're feeling neutral? Kind of things like that. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? What are they doing? Um, and then once you kind of know what that baseline looks like as a provider, then it's important to implement skills to try to return to that baseline. So when the client is experiencing depressive symptoms, things like that, it's important to do things to like build confidence, things that can um, get more energy going, things like that. And then when a client is experiencing more manic symptoms, it's important to do like mindfulness activities, kind of things to bring them back down. Maybe like scheduling, things like that to help with staying on task or getting the things done that need done. Um, and then when they're at that baseline, it can be good to do things like the skill that I had mentioned earlier, like with coping ahead, and safety planning is another big thing that you should be doing while the person is at that baseline and not experiencing tons of high emotions.
And I know one of the activities that you had said at our staff meeting where you talked about bipolar disorder was for depressive symptoms to do truth or dare, which I thought was funny because most people don't think of that as like a counseling intervention. Can you talk about how truth or dare can be used in counseling sessions to kind of help clients reach back to that baseline?
Yeah. So I believe I did that one for the accumulating positive experiences from the ABC skill. So truth or dare can be used, especially I've noticed with younger kids, they absolutely love playing truth or dare. And they can it's the most fun for them when they tell me to do a dare and then I do something silly. But the truths can be deep questions. They can be questions that are like meant to promote confidence, things like that. You know, when you're asking truth or dare questions to kids that are having these kind of symptoms, it's important to still make it fun, but also include little I don't know, places that they might not realize that they're doing therapy work, but that they are. So yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, and how does somebody find what their baseline is? Because when we talk about manic episodes, hypomanic episodes, and major depressive episodes, the symptomology diagnostically is pretty specific, but most people do experience some symptoms at some points of a manic episode or a hypomanic episode or a major depressive episode, but might not meet criteria for one of those episodes. So how can really anybody find kind of where their baseline is?
Yeah, so there's lots of different things you can do. I think um, one thing that's really important in finding your baseline is being mindful of yourself and your thoughts. And one thing that can help with that is reflecting. So, like at the end of each day or at the end of your week, you can reflect on like, how was I feeling this week? What things did I get done versus not get done? Things like that. Um, and another good way to kind of find what your baseline is just to check in with yourself and be like, okay, am I really angry right now? Am I really excited right now? Am I really sad right now? Or am I neutral? And kind of giving yourself those options and also like labeling your thoughts or emotions can kind of help to I don't know, I'm a very visual person, so whenever I am doing reflecting or mindfulness, things like that, I need to write it down for me to be able to actually see, okay, so today I was really, really sad all day, and I only got three things done from my list. And then tomorrow, maybe I am really excited and I got everything done from my list plus five things. Like, so that's kind of how you can do emotion tracking and kind of figure out what your baseline is.
And can you talk about some of the symptoms too with depressive and manic? I know people, I feel like we've all heard about bipolar and people can kind of think it like manic, that sounds scary. So kind of talking about like how it maybe isn't as scary as people think and like it might not even be as like you're acting all crazy or whatever as people might think. So what are some of those symptoms that people might show if they're in that depressive or manic state?
Yeah. So depressive symptoms are, I think, more commonly known. Kind of that not having energy, not having motivation, kind of like feeling like you are lethargic, needing to stay in bed all day, um, things like that. And then manic symptoms would be more like racing thoughts and like not necessarily being very good at time management or being very impulsive, things like that. I think those are some of the main things for the manic.
Yeah, I think that, it currently it does feel like when somebody talks about having major depressive disorder because they're having major depressive episodes, when somebody says, Okay, I'm struggling with depression. That, even in the last 10 years, has felt a lot more accepted in our society, has felt a lot more normalized in our society, and a lot less fear around what a major depressive episode is. Although between the a manic episode or hypomanic episode and a major depressive episode is actually more dangerous than a manic episode right, just statistically. But the manic episodes are the ones that society is really afraid of. And I think it's because of the word manic has it had a lot of really negative connotations in the media. People being misdiagnosed, people being mislabeled when things do happen that people are afraid of. So somebody commits a crime, and they say this maniac, right? The term maniac, right? Or they're this manic person, when really a lot of times what that person is experiencing is schizophrenia, or so there are other diagnoses that get labeled as mania or get labeled as a manic episode that in the media that really are not and do not have anything to do with it. And a lot of people that have bipolar disorder 1 or 2 will state that their manic episodes are their most healthy, they're most helpful to them, right? They feel the best. They feel the most productive. They feel the most social when they're in those episodes, and it can lead to it being challenging to want to come back to baseline. And so a lot of medications have that goal of trying to bring us back to baseline. But for a lot of people that have this condition, it's challenging because the manic episode times feel good. They feel productive. We feel more creative in those times. And if you think about somebody in your mind that is very organized, very on it, is very, is doing a lot of things or a lot of creative things, that doesn't tend to be the image that comes to mind when we think about having a manic episode, but that's absolutely a way that that can present itself. And in those situations, because those symptoms are coming out in a very pro-social way, then a lot of times those episodes are minimized. The risk and the challenges that the person is experiencing are minimized by society because we go, well, they're doing great, right? They're out socializing, and they're doing all of these new projects, right? And so it can feel like there's more stigma on those manic episodes than maybe on those depressive episodes. And for the person experiencing it, it can feel like, well, why would I want to, right? Like I want to stop having major depressive episodes. That would be great, but why would I want to stop having these manic episodes or these hypomanic episodes? So that can be such a challenge. Can you tell us how these interventions or what kinds of interventions you use in those situations?
I think that it can be really important to remember or identify that because those manic episodes might feel so great and those emotions are really intense, but on the other side of the spectrum than the depressive, it can really make those depressive symptoms feel so much worse when they are coming down because it's such a big shift from all the way up here, high emotional, like the happy feelings, the getting a bunch of stuff done, the being social, things like that. And then it's a long drop to the depressive state. Whereas if you were at a baseline, it would be less of a drop. Um, so I think that some of the interventions that would be helpful for when a client is experiencing those more manic symptoms is a behavioral activation chart. So I do that a lot in my sessions, really with most of my clients, not just with those experiencing manic symptoms, but I think it can be really helpful to like I said, visualize what you need to do and what needs to get done. And then on those charts, I also have like deep breathing exercise and like count to 10 or just like little things that throughout the session the client is supposed to be doing or should do at some point in order to kind of implement some of those more mindfulness or relaxation activities to try to lower them step by step throughout our sessions.
I know we talked about like a good thing with BHIS too is that parent participation is usually required. Do you usually try and incorporate those things with the parent so like parent knows how to do those activities when we're not there? And can you kind of talk about like the difference in activities you might do in a session with parents present versus an individual BHIS session?
Yeah. So I definitely do include parents in almost all of my activities. And if I do individual things, then I like to talk about what we did in our session afterwards with the parent and show them any worksheets or charts that we made. And I like to try to have the client explain what we did or what the chart means so that they can kind of be the teacher, and then we know that teaching helps us learn more. So um and some of the differences between like individual and family sessions I'd say is for me at least, when I do individual sessions I typically do more like worksheets or kind of like harder stuff, I guess. And then when I'm with the families, I do a little bit more easy, like the games, like the apples to apples thing I was talking about before, and kind of have it be more upbeat during family sessions. Um, but I think it's important to let the parents know what's going on in every session so that they can try to implement the things that I'm implementing during the sessions as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It is so important. It can seem like, well, we spent an hour playing Truth or Dare, right? And so it can feel to parents without that communication that you're supporting, right? That the it is why that is so important because without it, it can look like we're playing Monopoly for 3 hours because we are playing Monopoly for 3 hours. And we are working on these interventions. And I loved your kind of visual of com the idea of stepping back down to baseline, as opposed to, and I just picture, going down a really steep water slide is how it can just feel, right? Going from that manic episode to that depressive episode. And what you're talking about is learning to build a staircase for ourselves and learning how to walk down those stairs because the impact when we hit the bottom, when we're walking downstairs, is much different than the impact when we hit the bottom when we're sliding down a very steep slide. So I just love that analogy. I love that way of thinking about it that you're describing because what it does is it doesn't take away from the experience at either episode. It just is helping to, and it's not saying, well, I'm going to magically have you stop having manic episodes, right? I'm going to magically stop having you have depressive episodes. But what we can do is practice how to have that softer landing, how to make the process of that much more comfortable for ourselves by planning that ahead of time. I think that's really, really great. And the recording feelings and achievements also so great because when we're going back, it can be so difficult for somebody with this diagnosis to remember what it's like. So when we're in that manic episode, it's like, oh, I can't even remember what it's like to be in a depressive episode, right? We think, why would somebody lay in their bed for 3 days in a row, right? There's so much to do. Or on the flip side of it, right? Like, oh my gosh, how is anybody getting up for work in the morning, right? Because we're in that major depressive episode. So having that recording of those feelings of how that day went and having it in our own words, either in our own handwriting or our own words when we're typing it on our phone, to know that, hey, I've been here before. I have been here before. And this is how I feel right now, and it feels terrible. And I felt like this before, and I survived, and I was okay, right? And it did pass. And so being able to have that reassurance takes away some of that fear as well, because when we're at the height of one of those episodes, it can feel like this is just my life now. This is never going to end, right? What is the point? And that's where the risk for suicidal ideation and self-harm comes in with those major depressive episodes, because when we're in it, we get relative amnesia. We cannot remember what it was like to function at baseline or what it was like to function in that manic episode. And so it can feel like, well, this is just my life now. So having that record of, no, we've been here before. I was feeling the exact same way before. And then look what happened 2 days later, right? I was able to kind of step up that staircase, bring myself to being more present, more in the middle, and when we talk about anxiety and depression, we talk about how anxiety is our mind in the future, right? Our feet are right in this moment right here, but our mind is in the future in anxiety. When we're in major depressive disorder, a lot of times our mind is in the past. And so it bringing us to that middle ground, bringing us back into the present with those mindfulness activities, with those meditations, is just so important that we build that skill. And every time we do it and fail, we're making progress. That's one step more. So we can take away the that fear of failing as well by doing it more often, failing and being okay, and failing and being okay. So I love those interventions, Alexis. So what suggestion might you give to somebody who might be maybe on the fence about starting counseling, or maybe has started counseling and is like, I don't know if this is for me, right? I don't know if this person is a match. What suggestion might you give them?
Um, I would say just like be brave. Be brave for 20 seconds, I guess. If you are on the fence about being in counseling, make the call. Be brave for 20 seconds, and the rest will follow. And if you are already in counseling and you're not sure if it's a great fit, advocate for yourself. Talk to your therapist about what you want or are needing out of therapy, and however you feel about their response to that is how you feel, and that's okay. You can continue to be brave again for another 20 seconds and call a new therapist. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. Well, if you're listening and are interested in starting BHIS with Alexis, she is taking new clients and she's in the Cedar Rapids or Anamosa area. So you can look her up at heartandsolutions.net and click on Cedar Rapids and see her bio there. Alexis, thank you so much for being our guest. It was so great to talk with you more and get more info on BHIS and bipolar disorder as well.
I'm Alexis Moore, and I need a counselor.
And I'm Chrissa Hunt.
And I'm Julie Johnson, and we need a counselor.
And so do you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the You Need a Counselor podcast. We are so grateful that you're here. Now, we want to hear from you. Text us or give us a call at 515-650-3231. You can also find and connect with You Need a Counselor on Facebook and Instagram. If you've enjoyed today's show, please take a moment to like, review, or leave a comment, as all of these things help others to find and benefit from the podcast as well. If you're in the state of Iowa and interested in mental health counseling or behavioral health intervention services, give us a call at 800-531-4236.